Why does existence seem to weigh so heavily on us? Even amidst relentless striving, countless plans, and the constant vigilance necessary to avoid life's setbacks, we often find ourselves grasping at stability that remains forever beyond our reach. Every detail is scrutinized, every rule followed, every ounce of approval pursued, and still, the horizon of true peace perpetually shifts just out of sight. From the earliest ages, we are indoctrinated into a cult of control, led to believe that those who are diligent enough, sharp enough, and thorough enough can finally anchor life in certainty. But what if this entire promise of order through discipline and willpower is a mirage? What if the exhausting quest for control is not only ineffective, but the very thing multiplying our fatigue and alienation? Centuries ago, Schopenhauer offered a piercing diagnosis. The hunger for mastery is the taproot of human misery. We labor under the illusion that the world's mercurial tides can be subdued by logic and calculation. But as Schopenhauer saw it, what compels us forward, what he called the will to live, acts less like a thinking strategist and more like a relentless, senseless appetite. This drive is never appeased. It creates in us an endless striving, refusing to grant lasting satisfaction or genuine rest. Every time we wrestle life toward our desired direction, it has already begun to recoil. The harder we chase happiness, the more elusive it becomes. Suffering, when avoided, only ensnares us with greater force. Here lies the paradox at the heart of it all. True strength emerges not by subduing existence, but by yielding to it. Power is discovered in letting go. When we cease our compulsive efforts to choreograph every outcome, an unfamiliar kind of freedom reveals itself. The less we hunger for approval, the more self-assured we appear. The instant we stop fearing failure, a new and deep-seated boldness awakens. In surrendering our grip, we are pulled along by life's current, oftentimes toward shores we never could have charted. Why does release work? Why would Schopenhauer, who so relentlessly described the chaos of our condition, claim that the answer lies not in conquering the world's unpredictability, but in accepting it? To unravel this, we must stare directly into that uncomfortable truth. The more single-mindedly we try to subdue life, the more our anxieties multiply. Very early in life, we absorb the pervasive message that through sheer determination, we can custom make our destinies. We are sold a story where success, happiness, and love are crafted by effort, a morality play where every achievement is a reward for virtue. But living as if the world is so pliant only hardens our disappointment. At the core, existence flows from this impersonal, irrational will, a blind urge to persist, forever seeking, never satisfied. As soon as one hunger is sated, the next gnaws at us. Security lasts just long enough for a new shadow of uncertainty to creep close behind. Fulfillment becomes an ever-receding target. The cycles of hope and deflation, of striving and erosion, are endless. For each moment of happiness, anxiety about its loss sets in. Every attempt to solidify our place only unmasks the fragility of what we have constructed. We try to orchestrate our reputations, secure our emotional well-being, ensure our accomplishments are recognized, but these are as sturdy as sand castles by the tide, no sooner built than threatened by the slightest change in wind. What Schopenhauer reveals is that real freedom can be glimpsed the moment we stop fighting for such control. This relentless will, always whispering that one more adjustment, one more safeguard will finally quiet its yearnings, cannot be vanquished. Yet we need not be subject to its torment. By accepting unpredictability, by embracing the certainty of disappointment and the fleeting nature of all warmth and joy, we remove much of life's sharpest barbs. Letting go is not a gesture of defeat. It is the act of loosening your neck from the yoke of the impossible. Since infancy, we are wired to hunt desperately for approval, first from those closest to us, and later from ever-widening circles. Acceptance is paired with safety, rejection with danger. This deep conditioning wires us to adapt ourselves, to edit our thoughts and camouflage our impulses, all in a bid to fit the silent requirements of the crowd. Schopenhauer saw this hunger for social validation as a particularly insidious snare. When your sense of self floats on the ever-shifting seas of others' opinion, you build your confidence on sand. Flattery brings a fleeting euphoria, but criticism slices deeply. Life becomes a performance for an imagined jury. Words, gestures, even beliefs twisted to appease or avoid displeasure. Not for the sake of joy, but for the adrenaline drip of perceived safety. This need for validation, embedded in our most animal instincts, may have once offered protection, but now it only distances us from any true expression of self. The more obsessed you are with winning acceptance, the more alienated you become from any genuine identity. Schopenhauer's radical proposal: cease altogether this chase. Approval is fickle, conditional, and ultimately outside your grasp. By releasing yourself from the need to be liked, you begin to encounter power, one not rooted in admiration, but in an unshakable indifference to it. Those who detach from compulsive approval are granted a kind of emotional sovereignty, a foundation immune to the tremors of external judgment. Those who can weather disdain or indifference without crumbling, paradoxically, often radiate the very authenticity that inspires respect. While the masses contort themselves with the weight of possible disapproval, the self-possessed move lightly, unencumbered by the phantoms that haunt so many. The human mind, tracing back to its most primitive origins, has always associated safety with control. We are led to believe that the more cautious we become, the more elaborate our plans, the better we are at anticipating threats, the more secure our existence will be. This is the myth of total control, the persistent fantasy that if we can just anticipate every risk, compose strategies for every possibility, and over-prepare ourselves for every outcome, we can finally outmaneuver the chaos that defines reality. Yet, contrary to what is often admired as vigilance or intelligence, this way of living is at its core driven by fear, the dread of disorder, the unknown, and the uncontrollable. According to Schopenhauer, the mind's desperate scramble to avoid discomfort takes the form of mental overdrive. Replaying old conversations, projecting future arguments, obsessing over past errors, always convinced that if we gather enough understanding, salvation is finally within reach. But the truth is as bracing as it is inescapable. No amount of rehearsing or rationalizing can ever hope to vanquish the basic unpredictability and even absurdity of existence. The only tangible result of all this frantic calculation is exhaustion, anxiety, and, most ironically, a sense of greater paralysis. The paradox deepens. The more our minds work to shield us from surprise, the more suffocated we become by the infinite branches of possibility. Choices that should be simple transform into tortuous labyrinths for the overthinker. Every decision spawning a dozen anxieties about its hidden consequences. Problems that might dissolve on their own are instead inflated and protected by compulsive analysis, ensuring they persist far longer than necessary. At the end, what we are left with is only frustration, mounting anguish, and the intoxicating loneliness of consciousness burdened by itself. For Schopenhauer, peace will never be won by accumulating answers, but by cultivating the tranquility to live amidst unsolved riddles. Life is less a puzzle to be cracked than a current to be entered. The moment you untether yourself from the slavery of needing to understand and define everything, you allow space for spontaneity, for the unscripted to enrich your life. Excessive thought severs us from the immediacy and vibrancy of reality. Acceptance, let go, release restores that connection. Genuine mental quiet does not rest on having every answer, but on freely choosing not to need them. Western culture, in particular, has sanctified the pursuit of perfection. We are coached from childhood to believe that flawlessness in achievement, appearance, status, and even virtue is possible, and more poignantly, necessary. This is an unkind fiction. The world, in all its complexity and depth, will never yield to perfection. Chaos, irregularity, imperfection, they are the basic fabric of being. Our refusal to welcome these conditions not only distances us from peace, but shackles us with a kind of endless, self-renewing dissatisfaction. Perfectionism is not rigor. It is fear in extravagant disguise. The fear of criticism, the fear of failing, the fear of being seen as lacking. The cycle is merciless. Every minor accomplishment quickly fades, overshadowed by the next deficiency, the next imperfection, always another flaw to obsess with. There is no rest in this race. No amount of achievement ever seems to yield true contentment, because the engine running this show is, as Schopenhauer emphasizes, the insatiable will, a force unable to grant true pause or satisfaction. Even great success is merely another step on an endless and featureless stairway. This is why so many people, even when admired by all, are haunted by a sense of emptiness. Fulfillment dissolves upon touching it, perpetually just out of reach. Salvation lies not at the illusionary summit of perfection, but in accepting that the summit does not exist. The secret is not in making every element of life smooth and polished, but in welcoming the beauty in what is incomplete, the peace inherent in imperfection, and the liberation that follows from surrendering the desperate need to impress or be admired. As you relinquish the oppressive burden of flawlessness, you become lighter, a participant in the drama of existence, not its terrified judge. The chaos of reality loses its sting, unpredictability becomes a partner rather than an enemy, and true resilience emerges from having nothing that must be fiercely protected. Failure, too, holds an exaggerated status in the mythology of human suffering. We are conditioned year by year to treat mistakes as something disgraceful, a symbolic confirmation of our deepest inadequacies. To fail, whether in love, in work, in simple daily matters, is portrayed as a blatant mark of unworthiness. Schopenhauer, however, breaks this binary. Success and failure are not eternal rivals, but inevitable phases in the rolling tide of experience. To demand a life without failure is to wish for a life unlived, to anesthetize oneself against any lesson or risk. Everything in human existence oscillates. Victories alternate with defeats. Triumphs pave the way for letdowns. State of joy naturally give way to sorrow and, sooner or later, to renewal. Binding your sense of self to these transitory states is to lose yourself in every high and shatter with every low. The real strength does not come from clinging to moments of glory or relentlessly avoiding mistakes, but from recognizing both as fleeting guests. Peace sets in once you see the rhythm of rise and fall as the very dance of being, unworthy of the power to define or destroy you. The terror of failure begins to dissolve when you realize that your dignity is not the outcome of your accomplishments, nor is your worth bartered for triumph. Real power flows from resilience, staying whole through all reversals, the courage to persist, make mistakes, experience pain, and remain standing. Freedom from the tyranny of failure is not irresponsibility, but the acceptance that life's rhythm cannot be outmaneuvered by willpower alone. When you understand yourself beyond your victory or loss, you step out of your own shadow and into the world as you are, unburdened and unafraid. Our fixation on results, perhaps the subtlest and most insidious of all human traps, is rooted in the widespread assumption that caring more, striving harder, and investing our identity in the outcome of every action will guarantee the success and fulfillment we crave. We're cautioned, persist, give your all, and you'll be rewarded. Yet hidden within this logic is a fundamental fragility. The more we tether our well-being and self-worth to specific outcomes, the more vulnerable we become to disappointment, uncertainty, and disillusionment when reality veers off script. Schopenhauer's hard-won wisdom is this: real strength is not measured by one's command over outcomes, but by letting go of the compulsion to control them. Detachment, in contrast to indifference, is a wellspring of true security and groundedness. When your identity is no longer mortgaged to the oscillations of success and failure, when your worth is not tossed about by the unpredictable winds of others' responses, your actions take on a new, effortless courage. You stop depending on external validation, on the fickle judgments of audiences near or distant, and instead locate a stability that no circumstance can uproot. Criticism becomes less sharp, praise less intoxicating, and your sense of self returns to your own custody. The detached person is not emotionally flat, but is capable of feeling intensely, yet refusing to let their happiness, peace, or dignity rise and fall with the uncontrollable tides of fate. There is no longer a desperate, clawing need to prove or protect oneself, and paradoxically, this unhurried confidence breeds the kind of presence that naturally attracts respect. Freedom is not found in winning at all costs, but in being able to lose gracefully, to endure uncertainty, and to act without the shadow of anxiety always looming overhead. Letting go, releasing one's grip on the grand expectations and persistent illusions of control, encounters resistance in nearly everyone. We have been taught, quite literally from our first steps, to see surrender as defeat, release as weakness, acceptance as a kind of passivity at odds with ambition and will. Yet, to truly let go, Schopenhauer reminds us, demands a courage far greater than holding on. Only a genuinely robust soul dares to abandon the intoxicating illusion of omnipotence, facing the tempests of life with poise, rather than trying to bottle the wind. Releasing is not about abandoning effort or refusing to face life's challenges. It is about transforming the nature of our struggle. No longer do we fight against the current, wasting precious energy in denial and resistance. Instead, we learn to move with the ebbs and flows of circumstance, discovering almost to our shock that what once seemed immovable obstacles now pass through us like water over stone. We no longer create brittle expectations that reality inevitably crumbles. We no longer answer every disappointment with outrage as if nature personally owed us satisfaction. The core of human agony, Schopenhauer insists, isn't life is cruelty, but our own insistence that life be something it never promised to become. Such liberation is not a retreat from the world, but an invitation to actually experience its richness. When we loosen our demands that life obey our blueprints, we can finally notice the serendipity in its detours, the thrill in its unpredictability, and the unforeseen gifts that arrive amid the disorder. Relationships become more genuine, ambitions less feverish, setbacks less catastrophic. Attempts to defend yourself from vulnerability, by controlling, anticipating, or closing off, are replaced by the audacity to enter life as you are, open and uncertain, but fully alive. The refusal to embrace unpredictability is the heaviest of all burdens. Each rigid expectation, each certainty compulsively defended fortified plan and prescripted hope, only guarantees more strain. When fate takes a turn and reality ignores our blueprints, as it inevitably does, the fall is more brutal than any spontaneous mishap. Even victories are short-lived, overshadowed almost immediately by the next storm of anticipation and doubt. The human experience is woven of fleeting moments between uncertainties. To find calm is to surrender to this ocean of not knowing, to allow yourself to float rather than plunge. In giving up the chains of expectation, we find a weightlessness rare in the world. The external world doesn't suddenly become gentle or predictable. Chaos, randomness, and pain remain. But we relinquish the inner war against what is, and in doing so, stop being dragged and start navigating. Our suffering ceases to be multiplied by resistance. Difficulty is met directly, with neither added bitterness nor denial. Finally, we become participants in the current of life, not merely battered by its swells, but learning to ride them with a strange but powerful grace. Acceptance, then, is not mere resignation or apathy to injustice or heartache. It is the wisdom to discern what is beyond change from what is within reach, and to spare no energy on the former while acting vigorously on the latter. To embrace this difference is to stop regarding your own limitations as a prison, and instead see them as a foundation, a vantage from which clarity, resilience, and self-understanding flourish. These are the qualities that foster deep peace, not the fantasy of endless upward progress and perpetual control. Schopenhauer's insight distills to this. Suffering intensifies every time we cling to what cannot be held. The greatest peace is not the reward for domination, but the gift of those who know where to place their effort and when to release it. In ceasing to demand that life bow to our dreams, we for the first time come face to face with the wild, radiant freedom of being alive. And this freedom does not separate us from the world or from others. Instead, it draws us into connection, into courage, into humility, into an openness that endures beyond loss and fleeting victory alike. In this state, mistakes sting less, setbacks lose their fangs, and the joy of simply being, imperfect and unguarded, takes on a beauty more lasting, because it asks nothing except your willingness to experience it. If these reflections help ignite a new way of seeing and living, let these ideas be a catalyst to explore even more deeply. Join a community that treasures thought and facing the truth, however uncomfortable. Subscribe for future explorations, perhaps in the next insight. You'll finally find the lightness that has always seemed just out of reach.